fell flat on Reba's ears. Reba rolled her eyes. My point is that when you got a hot lady, you gotta keep your guard up at all times. I used to, Van said, a wistful look on his face, momentarily forgetting Cheyenne was his wife. Reba's head snapped up. You used to, she asked, a dangerous edge in her voice, a sudden surge of maternal protectiveness, mixed with her own insecurities. Van immediately backpedaled, sensing the shift in her mood. No, baby, don't take it like that. It's just that I've grown into a mature, stable individual. That's all. He tried to sound convincing, but his eyes darted nervously. Well, I don't like it, Reba retorted, her voice rising in indignation. The conversation had veered dangerously close to her own insecurities, her own fears about aging and attractiveness, about being taken for granted. Cheyenne walked in then, looking tired, her eyes still a little downcast. Where have you been? Reba asked. I went to get something to eat, Cheyenne replied, her voice a little subdued, a stark contrast to her usual bubbly demeanor. Reba sighed. The house was a revolving door of anxieties and appetites. She turned back to Van, her gaze thoughtful. So, Van, you think that Brock might be right about this trainer? Van considered this, chewing thoughtfully. Sure, this guy could be hot for Barb Jean, but since Barb Jean isn't looking to play, there's no problem. And it's obvious, Barb Jean isn't looking. Why is this obvious? Reba pressed, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. 2 reasons, Van explained, counting on his fingers. Barb Jean isn't good at keeping secrets, and she thinks of you as her best friend. If she were fooling around with this guy, she'd be constantly talking about him to you. Heck, she'd probably even want you to meet him. Meet him. The words echoed in Reba's mind. Barbara Jean had indeed suggested she meet Jordan, and she had talked about him constantly, with an almost obsessive fervor. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture that was far more disturbing than Brock's vague suspicions. Van's logic, however crude, was alarmingly sound. Reba looked at the phone, then at her car keys. The decision, once fraught with moral ambiguity, now felt like a desperate necessity. She had to go. She had to see for herself. Not just for Brock, but for her own peace of mind, for her own understanding of this new pretty phenomenon. Where are you going? Van asked, noticing her sudden urgency. Go down to the gym with the rest of the wackos, Reba mumbled, grabbing her purse. She was going to spy, after all, and she was going to get to the bottom of this. The thought of it filled her with a strange mix of dread and morbid curiosity. As she walked out the door, Van called after her. All right, well, keep those arms as... Reba ignored him, her mind already racing, preparing for the inevitable confrontation, or perhaps the confirmation of her worst fears. The gym awaited, and with it, the truth, whatever it might be. Chapter 5. The gym's gaze. The gym was a sensory assault. The rhythmic thud of feet on treadmills, the clang of weights, the pulsing beat of pop music, and the pervasive scent of sweat mixed with antiseptic cleaner. Reba stepped inside, feeling immediately out of place in her sensible sneakers and loose-fitting sweatshirt, amidst a sea of neon spandex and sculpted physiques. She felt like an anthropologist observing a foreign tribe, a tribe of impossibly toned, impossibly energetic beings, all seemingly radiating an almost aggressive self. She scanned the vast, open space, her eyes darting from the free weights to the cardio machines, from the yoga mats to the spinning studio. Everywhere she looked, there were bodies, lean, muscled, glistening with effort. It was a stark contrast to her own comfortable, familiar curves, and for a moment, a wave of self-consciousness washed over her. The new pretty phenomenon was on full display here, and it was intimidating, almost overwhelming. Then she saw her. Barbara Jean, radiant and glowing, was in the midst of a stretching routine with a man who could only be Jordan. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an athletic build, his dark hair slicked back from his forehead. He moved with an easy grace, his voice a low, encouraging murmur, as he guided Barbara Jean through a series of impressive contortions that seemed to defy the laws of human anatomy. "Oh, hey Reba, you came!" Barbara Jean exclaimed, her face lighting up with genuine surprise and pleasure. She paused, her stretch, her smile wide, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Reba forced a smile in return, trying to appear nonchalant, as if she just happened to be passing by. She took another look around, feeling a familiar pang of something she couldn't quite name. Envy, perhaps, or just a profound sense of being on the outside looking in. A spectator in a world she didn't belong to. Man, there's a lot of beautiful people around here. Jordan, who had been smiling politely, suddenly interjected with a booming laugh that echoed across the gym floor. You should see them naked in the shower. Reba's jaw dropped. The casual, almost crude, comment sent a jolt of alarm through her. It was a joke, perhaps, but it felt entirely too familiar, too intimate, coming from a trainer to his client's friend. Her suspicions, momentarily dulled by the gym's overwhelming atmosphere, flared back to life, igniting a fresh wave of concern. Jordan, Barbara Zhang chided, a playful batting of his arm, but there was no real reprimand in her voice, just a shared amusement, a conspiratorial giggle that sent a shiver down Reba's spine. Hey, ready to start? Bob Jean? Jordan asked, turning his full attention back to her, his eyes twinkling with an undeniable charm. Yeah, Barbara Jean replied, her enthusiasm palpable. She smoothed down her leggings, a gesture of almost theatrical readiness. Hey, you look great in that outfit. Jordan chuckled, a deep, masculine sound. Oh, well, the other ones get me kinda baggy. He winked at Reba, a gesture that felt both charming and vaguely unsettling, as if he were acknowledging her presence in a way that felt a little too knowing. Barbara Jean, however, seemed to take it as a compliment, her chest puffing out slightly. Can you believe her? She did the impossible. She lost all that weight and kept these fillets. She gestured proudly to her chest, her voice full of a triumphant pride that bordered on boastful. Reba's eyes widened. The word felt oddly intimate, coming from Barbara Jean, and the gesture seemed to draw Jordan's gaze. She looked at Barbara Jean's chest, then at Jordan, who was now smiling at Barbara Jean with an almost paternal affection. The whole interaction felt loaded, charged with an unspoken subtext that made Reba's stomach churn. Okay, Jordan, this is my friend, Reba, Barbara Jean said, finally making the formal introduction, as if remembering her manners. Hey, I'm Jordan, he said, extended a hand, his grip firm and warm, his smile radiating an easy confidence. I'm Reba, she replied, shaking his hand, trying to gauge his sincerity, his intentions, searching for any hint of impropriety. So, you gonna join us, Reba? Jordan asked, his gaze assessing, a challenge in his eyes. Reba immediately the thought of exposing her Lasantoned physique to this sculpted specimen was mortifying. Oh, I don't know. I just think that me and my, fellows will just watch for a while. She gestured vaguely to her own chest, a nervous habit she'd developed, a subconscious attempt to deflect attention. Jordan laughed, a genuine, hearty sound that filled the cavernous gym. Well, Reba, you are not gonna get into shape by just watching. You need to sweat a little. Yeah, but you guys got to understand. It's been a while since I've been in a gym like this, and I don't think Reba began trying to articulate her discomfort, her fear of looking foolish, of being judged. But Jordan wasn't listening. He had already turned back to Barbara Jean, his attention fully on her. Hello. He took her leg and, with surprising ease, lifted it high above his head, guiding her into a deep, impressive stretch that seemed to defy gravity. Here, Bob Jean, you really are getting limber. Remember when you couldn't put your leg over my head? Barbara Jean giggled, a sound that grated on Reba's nerves, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. Remember when I didn't want to? She said it with a suggestive wink, a playful intimacy that felt entirely too personal. Reba stared, her mouth slightly agape, her heart pounding in her chest. This was beyond what she had imagined. The physical intimacy, the casual touch, the suggestive banter. It was all too much, too blatant, too revealing. Is that legal? Reba blurted out, her voice a little too loud in the otherwise focused gym, her cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. I mean, necessary. Jordan looked at her, a patient smile on his face, as if he were explaining a complex scientific principle to a child. It's critical to stretch the muscles out before you exercise them. Yeah, otherwise, you could really hurt something. He looked at Barbara Jean. Turn over. Barbara Jean complied, gracefully flipping onto her stomach. Jordan knelt beside her, his hands expertly positioning her, his touch lingering a little too long, a little too intimately for Reba's comfort. Reba, you need to watch this one, Barbara Jean said, her voice a little breathless.